Good morning, everybody. My name is Carl Sawatsky. On behalf of CTC Train Canada, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone to today's webinar entitled What's New and Improved in VMware's vSphere 6.5. As many of you know or have heard, this new product's been touted as being able to help IT more efficiently run, manage, and secure their applications both on and off premises. So today we'll have an opportunity to look at how it will do so, and as well look specifically at 4 to 5 new features that vSphere 6.5 comes with. Now obviously this is a product that's very deep in features, so this will give you a high-level overview of it, but also a good look at what it can do for you. We're very privileged today to have with us Brian Capizone. Brian brings with him over 20 years working and instructing on VMware, Cisco, Windows, as well as Citrix. So very well positioned to help us out in understanding what this new product is all about and as well answering our questions. At this point, I will turn the word over to Brian. Brian, take it away from here.
Great. Thank you very much, Carl. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate everybody's time this morning, or I guess it'd be afternoon for some. And I would like to say welcome. And let me go ahead and share my desktop. So with that, I am going to open this up to my little slide deck here. All right, so like Carl said, this is going to be a high-level overview. We've got a few things to discuss. First off, let me introduce myself. I'm Brian Capizone. I reside in Southern California, which we actually got a break from the rain. I'm not complaining, and we like the rain here because we're lacking it some. Been in the IT field for quite a few years. Before that, I did several things with computers, not necessarily working on them, but like I was in the semiconductor industry. I was also a printed circuit board designer and a few other things. I've taught over 200 classes for VMware's core set of classes like their ICM, Fast Track, and so on from 3.x until now. And so I've got a little bit of experience with it. I enjoy the training. I've been doing it both in the US and outside all over the world. And what we're going to look at today is basically what's covered in the ICM, this install, configure, manage class, kind of like the core class for the vSphere environment, okay? Because you got to have a host before you can have a VM, right? You got to have some kind of a virtualization platform. So we'll look at what's going to be covered in an ICM if you were to set an ICM. Then we're going to look at the vCenter Server Appliance new features, compute new features, storage new features, management new features, networking and security new features. And then I've got a little slide on 6.0 and 6.5 side-by-side comparison. All right, so you can, of course, go online and go to VMware's website and look up on their training and certification sites to find out all the different classes that they have. This one here, like I said, the install, configure, manage is like their base class. And again, you know, the kind of the idea and when this all started was like, let's take our physical data center and consolidate. So maybe we're saving some money. Maybe we're saving some money on electrical costs or cooling costs or hardware costs, right? Before we can have any of the things that we want to get through virtualization, like the virtual machines, the flexibility that we have with virtual machines, we have to have our hosts, and maybe we have multiple hosts, maybe we're a large environment and we have multiple hosts and a vCenter server to manage those hosts. So the ICM is a great introduction to that, and it covers quite a bit from the ground up, installation, configuration, and management of a vSphere environment. So we start off by looking at, let me get my highlighter, sorry. All right, we start off looking at basically what is virtualization, okay, and what is a software-defined data center. in progressing through that, and we look at what is a host, what is our ESXi host, how does that help us virtualize, right? That's our virtualization platform. Okay, we look at building virtual machines or deploying virtual machines on that host, and I've kind of packaged some of the modules that are later on in the week in this one bullet point right here, because in the very beginning we just learned how to deploy a single virtual machine and some of the ins and outs of that virtual machine, like the files, what makes up that virtual machine, how does it work, applications you can install in it like VMware tools to help it to integrate the operating system of the guest to the vSphere environment. A little later on in the week, you look at managing the virtual machines by templating, cloning, customization, all that good stuff. Migrating the virtual machines is also handled. This is very exciting stuff here with vMotion, right? And vMotion has matured over the years, and it has become this tool that is like indispensable with moving virtual machines live while they're up and running, while users are in them. Allows you to move these things from compute resource to compute resource, or host to host, or even from storage to storage. Like I know everybody has had their laptop or their desktop at one point, and you had so many applications running on it, and it's been overloaded, and you really can't do anything about that as a physical machine. I mean, when you have a business critical application running, I can't just power the system off and jam a stick of memory in there, right? But with virtual machines, we have this huge amount of flexibility, and migration is a great tool to allow us to move from a system that is lacking resources to one that is got more resources. And we're also looking a little later on at monitoring resource usage, okay, both at the virtual machine level and at the host level. We're going to look at vCenter server in an ICM, where what is vCenter server, right? Our management server. We'll look at the different options that we have, like our Windows vCenter server, which is really kind of going to the wayside. They've really matured the appliance. The vCenter server Linux appliance has become a long way, and it's really exciting, some of the new features that they have in 6.5. So we'll look at those in a little bit. We'll look at navigating the vSphere client, and this kind of cracks me up, the vSphere client, because if you were to tell anybody, you know, that's been around for a while, the vSphere client, they automatically think of the VIC or the C# or the FIT client, right? And they're going away from that, right? It's finally come to fruition where we don't really have that VIC anymore, and that was kept around, especially in like 5.5 and 6, to connect to the host directly. Well, the vSphere client, as we see it today, is actually a web client connecting directly to the host. Okay, and I'll demo that in a little bit. So we'll look at the vSphere client, we'll look at the web client, we'll look at some other things, and I'll explain some differences between those. In the ICM, you also look at managing the inventory, right? How do I keep things organized with folders, resource pools, clusters, different things like that. You look at virtual storage in the ICM, how to utilize shared storage. Really, if you want a successful virtual environment, you want to have shared storage so that when you have your clustering technologies, right, DRS and HA, you'll be able to successfully migrate and fail over virtual machines that are on shared storage instead of sitting on a local machine's disks. Okay, so we look at managing the different types of storage. How do we connect to the storage? What kind of storage can we use? And such. In 6.5, they actually came out with a new VMFS version called VMFS 6. Right? If you guys have been around for a bit, you know that VMFS 5 has been around for a long while. So now they have a new one. Like I mentioned, monitoring resource usage, managing resources. This is also discussed in the ICM by using virtual machine level settings and resource pool settings so that we can group certain virtual machines together in resource pools and in clusters, right, so that we can more efficiently manage their resources. Again, clustering is a huge one, right? This is really exciting stuff here when we have the ability to automatically recover virtual machines because of a host failure. That's great technology. right? I can go ahead and have several virtual machines running on a host. The host dies. The virtual machines should automatically start back up on remaining hosts. Or with DRS, right? Distributed Resource Scheduler, or high availability. Big two cluster of features in vSphere. DRS is going to allow us to use vMotion to automatically migrate virtual machines from one host to another when one host is maybe experiencing a little heavier load, or your environment is flexing because of a busy season or a busy part of the day. And DRS allows us to potentially automatically migrate our virtual machines from one host to another. Another feature that has matured greatly, and this is really cool, is fault tolerance. Fault tolerance is a feature of HA, high availability, and allows us to have zero downtime, zero data loss for key virtual machines. And if you guys had looked at any of the recordings or were able to go to VMworld for 6.0, then you know that fault tolerance has matured, right? It's not that, that teenager that's kind of sitting in the house not doing anything. It's the college graduate, where we can have multiple, up to 4 processors in the virtual machine and still configure fault tolerance. That was like the holdback with fault tolerance for a lot of folks, is you can only have a single vCPU in your virtual machine, but not anymore, right? You can have multiple ones up to 4. And then lastly, Update Manager is also discussed, and this is really exciting for me with 6.5. And I'll explain what I mean by that is integration. I'm just going to leave it with that and say that, when we come up to the slide and we talk more about Update Manager, you'll see what I'm talking about. So at this point, I would like to ask if there is any questions regarding your or the ICM class. If you have any questions, you can post those in the chat window, or maybe they were in the QA. Carl?
Yeah, nothing having come in as of yet, Brian. So again, anyone, if you have some questions, feel free to input them. In particular on the content Brian has just covered. If you have a question on that, post that. And if not, we will move on to the next topic. So yeah, doesn't look like anything as of yet, Brian.
Okay, we'll move on. And all right, so the next thing that I have here is new features for the vCenter Server Appliance. Like I was saying, VMware is really pushing towards the appliance to be the tool that you use to manage your environment. Okay, and there is still the Windows vCenter Server, but the appliance has really matured and come a long way. Excuse me. So with the appliance, you have several different things. And I'm going to look at all these, but really touch on just a few as far as the high-level overview. Okay, because we still got quite a few things to talk about. We have enhanced vCenter Server upgrade and patching. Some exciting things in there is the ability for one, the management of the vCenter Server Appliance has become easier, if you will, in a UI called the VAMI. I don't know if you guys are familiar with vCenter Server Appliances, but in the vCenter Appliance, I should say VMware Appliances and the vCenter Appliance. Okay, in the past, there was this VAMI, vSphere Appliance Management Interface is what that stands for. Okay, and we had one for the vCenter Server Appliance, and then they took that away, and we were mostly doing our management through the console of the VM. But they brought that back with a vengeance, and even more cool stuff that we can do with managing our vCenter Server Appliance. It makes it a lot easier. So one of the things I would like to show is if we go here, log me out. Okay. Well, here is the VAMI, and like in the past, it would have the IP address or the DNS name of the vCenter Server Appliance, :5480. That's kind of like their management port that they would use. And as you can see here, I've logged in with root, and it gives us quite a bit in this management app. It gives us a nice summary on some health status, single sign-on, and so on. Right now, the appliance is set up as an embedded platform service controller, so everything is built into this one virtual machine appliance, but we still have the ability to have embedded and external platform service controllers. A platform service controller is the quote-unquote single sign-on on steroids. Okay, it gives us quite a bit of features, and you can learn about those in a class, a VMware class like the ICM. We have the ability to enable certain features like SSH and Bash Shell. We have the ability to manage some networking features. Monitoring is also something that has been implemented in the VMI. Okay, monitoring for networking and CPU and memory, which is really neat. I mean, right away you can come in and see this resource usage in the VMI. Okay, managing the network, you know, some basic networking features that you're going to be able to manage. It's not like I guess as inclusive as selecting the web client and managing a host, but it does allow you to do your basic management here. Time setup. Okay, you can update the VMI from within here, which is a more feature-rich wizard. I mean, they've really gotten to the wizards that do a lot of the features inside of vSphere have come a long way, and this is no exception. All right, so like I said, enhanced vCenter install, upgrade, patching, updating. Administration, we get to change passwords, do a few other things in here. Configure syslog settings, so you can have like the centralized log collection. Like I said here, CPU and memory monitoring, database management and monitoring. Okay. There's also a appliance migration tool. Now this is really great because in the past, when 6.0, maybe it was even before that, 5.5, you know, there was really, if I deployed through an appliance, there wasn't really an easy way to migrate to a newer version, or if I had the Windows version and I wanted to move to the appliance, there wasn't really any easy way to move to a newer version until we've got up to like 6 or 5.5 in some of the later updates. But they've really come a long way with migration, and you can migrate from, you know, previous version appliance. You'd have to double check on the version that you can migrate to, right? You'd go to your migration documentation and see, oh, I can migrate from a 5.5 to a such and such, right? 6.5 in this particular case. But the migration tool is actually built into the installation media. Oops, sorry. So if I go here to class materials, and this is a lab environment, and I go to class files, and then here we have the VMware VCSA, this is like the installation. And then I go to UI installer, Win32 installer. And this would be like me wanting to deploy the appliance. And you'll see by their first screen all the different things that you can do with the installer. All right, I can do an install, upgrade, migrate, restore. One of the neat things about the vCenter Server Appliance is you have like this in-place integrated backup utility. So I can back up my vCenter Server Appliance and then come to this installer and do a restore, right? Previously created vCenter Server Appliance backup. Or I have this migration wizard. Okay, so I have this easy tool to migrate from one version to another, one platform to another. Pardon me. Update Manager for the vCenter Server Appliance. Now, this was something that I was really kind of disappointed in 6.0, is that Update Manager wasn't implemented or integrated in the appliance. And now it is. It's fully integrated into the appliance, the web client. You don't have to have another Windows server. Now, I kind of started my career in Windows, you know, so I appreciate all that it brought to us and stuff, but, you know, licensing costs, hardware costs, software costs. So being able to have this all-in-one solution with Update Manager integrated with it is a fantastic advancement. So we have Update Manager integrated into the vCenter Server Appliance and into the web client. If I go here and we look at the web client, okay, we see on the home page we have Update Manager. If I click on that, right, I can select my vCenter Server Appliance, and you can see all the stuff that I used to have to go to the vSphere client, or what was it in 5.5 or 6, they called it the Update Manager utility or something like that. It was just a, the vSphere client with the plugin installed. But now it's all in the web client. So I get to do everything here that I used to do in the past. I can monitor events, notifications, okay, if anything was happening. Manage my baselines, my download settings. So everything that was in the old client is now in the web client. Okay, and that makes our job easier. It makes this integration great. We have enhanced auto deploy. They actually have a UI for auto deploy, so you don't have to all do everything with auto deploy from the command prompt. Now, auto deploy, if you guys aren't familiar with that, is a way of rapidly deploying hosts, your ESXi hosts, right? If you think of certain companies that have like these all-inclusive kind of boxes, if you will, like Cisco has their UCS, HDS or Hitachi Data Systems has their UCP. They have these things where you have the blade servers in these chassis, a couple of management servers, and it's a PXE booted environment. So I have a bunch of blades in there. I turn on the blades. They get information from the vCenter server / the auto deploy architecture, and it boots up in memory my ESXi host. So what's great about that is if I have a hardware failure, I pluck the old blade out, I put a new one in, I point it in the right direction, right, and I can have it back up and running, configured in a matter of moments. Okay, and now that all kind of depends on how active the environment is and such, and but it's a fantastic way of automatically deploying your hosts and having standardization. Host profiles is also a part of that standardization for the hosts, which host profiles is used by the auto deploy environment. Let me give me my arrow here. There we go. Okay. So auto deploy, host profiles work together. Host profiles are created and utilized by auto deploy along with several other features of auto deploy. Okay, VMware tools, lifecycle management. This is another tool that's going to be a simplified and scalable approach for your installing and upgrading of your VMware tools, which in the previous version they talk about how upgrading VMware tools is going to be less of an impact on the environment because sometimes, when you first install VMware tools, it requires a reboot. Upgrading VMware tools had also required reboots in some cases, but it requires less of reboots for certain virtual machines when you upgrade your VMware tools. And upgrades can be handled through Update Manager for your VMware tools, as you guys probably know. Okay, vSphere Automation API. Okay, there's this new component that they're putting out there for API called REST, Representational State Transfer. Okay, REST API. There's SDKs, multi-platform CLI. There's Data Center CLI and the regular old CLI, which is the command line interface. It's all now available to provide simplified VM management and automation of your vCenter Server Appliance, right? That kind of base configuration and services. Okay, high availability. Okay, so we have some neat options now for vCenter Server and the Platform Service Controller high availability, which is built in to the appliance. In the past, it was always kind of my dream to say, hey, you know what would be cool is if the vCenter Server was able to be a fault-tolerant virtual machine. Right? In the past, that wasn't possible because fault tolerance required had a limit of a single vCPU, and vCenter Server usually had more than one vCPU. So when it was a virtual machine, so that wasn't really an option. right? They had vCenter Server Heartbeat way back in the day, but they took that away, retired that product. So really your option was having vCenter serve as a VM in an HA cluster, which is a great option, right? Don't get me wrong. But fault tolerance is above and beyond that, right? HA is that umbrella you held in your hand to keep your body more or less dry from the rain. But if you're standing in a giant puddle without rubber boots, your feet are getting wet, right? So if you had rubber boots on, you're keeping your feet dry, and that was fault tolerance, keeping critical things up and running. So now we have these options for the platform service controller having high availability options and the vCenter server component having high availability options. Okay. In the vCenter Server Appliance, we can deploy it as an embedded or as a external platform service controller. Let me show you something here. Oh, I gotta turn that off. All right. So did I close the installer? I guess I did. Okay. No, I didn't. Okay. So let's look at this real quick. So I can deploy the appliance, and the deployment wizard for the appliance has gotten better, right? In the past, to deploy a Linux appliance, we had to have a Windows box, and that was kind of like, you know, what? Why do we have to have a Windows machine to deploy a Linux box? Because I've been in several environments where it was all Linux, and the client was like, well, I don't want any Windows machines in my environment, but I'm forced to have them because of certain things. Right now we can have this deployment wizard on Windows, Linux, or even Mac. So if we look at this, we have the EULA here, of course, you read the whole EULA. Here is the page that they've changed the colors, the look and feel of it a little bit, but it's still more or less the same thing. I can deploy the appliance as an embedded platform service controller, meaning that the vCenter server component and the PSC, platform services controller, is in one machine, one VM. Or if I have a larger, more complex environment, I go and deploy the PSC, platform service controller, as an external platform service controller, and then go back and deploy my vCenter server or vCenter servers. Okay, so I have several options in the appliance. We had this option before in 6, but they've made the wizard quite a bit easier to utilize. All right, vCenter Server Appliance and Database Management, a little bit easier in managing the database, the new 6.5 Appliance VMware, right, the management interface. It includes some monitoring of our usage of our database and our storage, right? We have that embedded vPostgres database that is in line, or how do they say it? It's on par with the SQL database. Like in the past, if I was running a Windows environment, I had a Windows vCenter server, I would most likely use a SQL database for my external enterprise database. And even farther in the past, they had the free version of SQL. Was it Express? They have SQL, Oracle. I mean, even way back in, what was it, 5.1, they had IBM DB2. Right now, the database options in 6 and 6.5 are SQL, Oracle, and the vPostgres. All right, and vPostgres has really come a ways to where it'd be silly not to consider it, even in a Windows environment, because it's very robust. Its capacity is the same or in line with SQL database and Oracle. Okay, so you can monitor the utilization of the vCenter Server Appliance's resources. Native vCenter Server backup and restore. This is cool. So I showed you the restore option in the installer. Right, we have a restore option here. But what about the backup of vCenter Server? Okay, so if we go to, there it is. If we go to the VMware for the vCenter Server Appliance, we have this backup option right here, creating a support bundle, rebooting, shutting down. So we got some options that we had before, but the backup is, come on, what I want to show you here. And so we can do a backup of our vCenter Server's appliance, as you can see here, HTTPS, HTTP, SCP, secure FTP, FTP. So I could actually do FTP-admin. Oh, wait a minute, location, sorry. 172.20.10.10. And then and look, you can also encrypt the backup data. That's a one-way encryption, so you got to make sure you keep that password, right? And keep it on lockdown. Don't put it on a sticky under your keyboard, of course. So it runs through and figures out what the size of the backup is. You can put a description in there, date, time, and so on, and make a backup of your vCenter Server appliance quite easily. 28 megs for stats, events, alarms, and tasks, and 553 for the inventory and configuration, validating input, review your work, do a finish, and then you got a backup, right? So it's pretty simple. And like I said, you go into the installer and you got the restore. Okay. Next thing we'll look at is compute enhancements. Oops, sorry. Where's my arrow? There we go. So extended support for new hardware, architectures, and guest operating systems. Of course, they are always expanding that. New hardware comes and goes, or hardware, I should say, comes and goes. We got new fancy all-flash hardware, or new NICs, or new HBA, stuff like that. So of course, VMware is keeping up with that game, right? The new architectures for the hardware, and the guest operating systems list are always growing, right? And I'm sure some of it is falling to the wayside. I used to say in the ICMs or such, we have over 64 plus guest operating systems. Not that everybody's going to use all 64, but hey, if I miss some of my DOS games that I used to play around with back in junior high, I could always go back and build a virtual machine and have a DOS game if I wanted to in my virtual environment. I mean, you get a plethora of guest operating systems. Okay, we have some enhanced guest OS and customization support, right? VMware, it's going to continue to offer like a broad range support of guest OSs, right? Even Windows 10 builds, the newest Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7.x or whatever the newest version is, Ubuntu, several new guest operating systems, and the ability to customize. Okay, there is even a tech preview of Windows Server 2016, so that's pretty exciting. New host client. So what is this? This is a replacement of the vSphere client that we were using to connect directly to a host, right? So instead of connecting through the vSphere client, oops, again, we have a web UI that we're going to use to connect to our host. Right, and when you're taking a class, you'll be walking through each one of these different appliance, or pardon me, interfaces, so that you can get more familiar with it. So as you can see, it's very similar to that of the web client. It's more or less the web client scaled back and connected directly to a host. Its menus, along with the web client's menus, have kind of changed a bit so that it's more user-friendly, if you will, but still has a lot of the same features that we were used to with the 6.0 and the 5.5 web client. Right. But again, this is the host client. So I look at managing my host, looking at summary of my host, managing my host, right? We can do system management, all the same features that we had before, but in a web format instead of the VIC. Okay, we can have a easy way of monitoring resource usage, right? Some of your core resources here, monitoring hardware, like this would be SIM data if we had any information to monitor. Your events, tasks, logs, notifications, all that stuff nicely packaged. I really like the look and feel of this. Virtual machines can be seen here. Storage, like what data stores, devices, adapters. It's still thinking about it. There we go. A couple of data stores. And again, a lot of the same things that we could have done in the past in the VIC can be done here in the host client, right? And it's HTML5 based, along with what they're calling the vSphere client is HTML5. So we have the web client, which is still based on Adobe Flex, so you need Flash, and then we have this HTML client. Okay. Where's that? There's the host. So again, the host client is this HTML5 based UI to manage your individual host to replace the VIC. Okay. Pardon me. Guest operating system and customization support. So we already looked at that. Host client, virtual NVMe. Okay, so NVMe, non-volatile memory express, introduces some new virtual device emulation of your NVMe Express 1.0e specification. So if you guys are using any of those devices, then you get some more support for that. You have para-virtualized RDMA, that stands for, oh gosh, brain fart, RDMA. Bugger, I forgot off the top of my head. Oh shoot, it's not coming to me.
Would that be remote direct memory access?
Thank you, yes, yes.
Quick Google search there, I didn't know that.
Yeah, appreciate that. You know, ever since the military, acronyms have always like befuddled me every once in a while. Good times, yay. All right, yes, so we have that support, this new para-virtualized. Now, para-virtualized is, starting from the beginning, let's just say, VMware does full virtualization of their virtual machines. So basically your guest OS doesn't really know it's a virtual machine. It thinks it's a physical machine, right? The guest OS is installed and managed essentially the same exact way as if it was a physical machine, barring any special device drivers and such that you might have to install, right? Para-virtualized, there's three basic ways of virtualization. There's a knowledge base article out there, a PDF, that VMware put out quite a long while ago, and it's understanding virtualization, full virtualization, para-virtualization, and hardware assist. Well, you know, coming up to today, we have processors in the world that offload some of that virtualization into the processor versus into the software. So we have hardware assist kind of built into our environments nowadays that we tap into. Intel VT technology or AMD technology is I hope I didn't get those backwards, but we have virtualization built into processors. Para-virtualization basically means we're kind of adjusting some of the, like if a guest operating system was para-virtualized, then there'd be some modifications to it, right? Para-virtualized RDMA is going to give us this driver support in Linux environments, which is compliant to your RDMA over a converged Ethernet, or ROCE version 1, right? And that's what they're talking about right here. So this is introducing this ROCE version 1.0 and version 2 support, and whatever the associated I/O ecosystems that are used with this. So there's a lot of new features that you may not even touch until later on in your environment, because it's just, you know, so brand new. It's like virtual volumes. When that came out in 6.0, it was like, virtual what? And not that virtual volumes was brand new in the world, it was just something that was integrated or utilized inside a vSphere environment, right? And there was very few people that are actually, or were actually utilizing it back in the day when it first started. I had the opportunity to go to Germany and work with some folks at HDS on their HNAS and utilizing vVols, right? So it was interesting stuff. I/O drivers and ecosystem. So there's continually updating existing and introducing some newer versions of your I/O devices that would be used, devices and drivers that would be used inside of the vSphere environment. Okay. Fault tolerance has been improved. It's constantly being improved. 6.0 was really the big improvement, where they had multiple NICs up to 4. When they have standard, enterprise, and enterprise plus, they said that standard and enterprise was using 2 vCPUs up to, and enterprise plus could use up to 4 vCPUs. And then they introduced a new architecture for fault tolerance, still utilizing like a modified vMotion to create the virtual machine on the secondary host. But the biggest thing was really you had 2 complete virtual machines that were synchronizing over the fault tolerant logging network, right? And that needs to be a dedicated fault tolerant logging network. And they said that 10 gig LAN is what was supported. It would work with a 1 gig, like if I did a nested environment, I could do fault tolerance in that, but it's not like it's going to be supported in a production environment. In a production environment, you want a dedicated 10 gig, and you can use multiple NICs for your fault tolerant logging network. Okay. Plus, fault tolerance has gotten more integrated, if you will, or interoperable with DRS. So it's basically looking at automating the initial placement of your fault tolerant virtual machines on particular hosts in the environment. Okay. And so the next thing that we're going to look at is storage enhancements. Pardon me. All right, so start off enhancements. There's been some enhancements to storage I/O control. Okay, storage I/O control allows us to do shares, limits, and reservations, just like if we had CPU or memory resource settings. Okay, in the past, pardon me, if I had set up storage I/O control, I had shares and limits. Okay, and so shares is a proportional mechanism to provide some importance to certain virtual machines disks that are sharing storage with other virtual machines. You know, the virtual machine with more shares wins at better access to the storage. Well, in this version, we have the ability to also do reservations, which in CPU and memory, if you look at reservations, you're guaranteeing access to a particular resource. Like if it was CPU and I have a reservation for a particular amount, then I'm guaranteeing the virtual machine to have access to that CPU if it can power on. Like memory as well. I can set a reservation for a virtual machine with 10 gigs of memory, and when that virtual machine powers up, if it can, if there's enough resources, then it has access, sole access to 10 gigs of memory because of the reservation. Storage policy-based management. So this actually goes in line with virtual SAN and virtual volumes. Okay, actually that's no need to click on that, but storage policy-based management components actually work with vSAN and virtual volumes policies, where I configure storage essentially one way, and I decide at the virtual machine level via a policy on how to utilize that storage. That was kind of like the beauty when I first really looked at virtual volumes and the virtual SAN. The beauty behind that is I configure storage basically one way, and that makes it easier on the vSphere administrator. Not necessarily easier on the storage administrator, but the vSphere administrator connects to storage, right, creates a bunch of policies, and applies them to the virtual machines how they need. Okay, so it's easy to create these policies, easy to manage these policies, easy to reconfigure the policies when necessary. Okay, we have some enhancements to our NFS 4.1. Don't forget that for the longest time we had NFS version 3, which is still around, right, because all the vSphere features work with NFS version 3, but not everything in 6 worked with NFS version 4.1, right? In vSphere 6, there was a few things that didn't work with NFS version 4.1. Some of those still may not actually be working with it, but we do have better security features in 4.1, right? There's stronger cryptographic algorithms with Kerberos, AES. There's support for IPv6 with Kerberos, and also support for Kerberos integrity checks. Okay. There's a Power CLI support for 4.1 in this release as well. Increases data store and path limit. Okay, so the number of LUN supported per host actually increased to 1024, and the number of paths increased to 4096. You'll see that again on the last slide, more or less, of the deck here. vMotion acceleration with virtual volumes replication. So one of the things about virtual volumes is that the idea was to offload a lot of the data services onto the storage system, storage subsystem, so that if I tell a particular machine to do a clone, it's not pulling the virtual machine files up to the host and back down to the different data store, or if I do a storage vMotion, it was telling the storage system to do that and let me know when you're done. Right? With virtual volumes, we have this integration with these data services. And with the vMotion acceleration with the virtual volumes replication, the replication was another one of those data services that I just mentioned that is kind of offloaded onto the storage system, right? So you use the virtual volumes to replicate your virtual machines using your storage array's native replication capabilities. That frees up the resources that are key to running the virtual machines on your host, right? CPU and memory are very important resources on the host for running the virtual machines, memory being that platinum resource, right? So if I can offload any processing of those data services onto the storage system, then it's a win-win situation for us. There's enhancements to the vSphere storage APIs for data protection. That means backing up virtual machines, taking snapshots, transferring compressed data over NVD mode, reusing vCenter server sessions. So some enhancements to data protection. There is a couple of appliances out there that help us with quote-unquote protecting virtual machines. There's the VDP, vSphere Data Protection Appliance, and the vSphere Replication, which is actually a part of SRM, Site Recovery Manager. But the replication and the Data Protection Appliance are free appliances at standard Enterprise and Enterprise Plus licensing models that allow you to back up and replicate your virtual machines. So there's some enhancements to that as well. Virtual SAN has some enhancements. There's iSCSI support, 2-node direct connect with a witness and traffic separation, or support for some latest hardware out there that can be installed inside of the host. Virtual SAN, in a nutshell, is the ability to leverage local storage on our host, but present it as shared storage to the environment. So you get this completely converged compute and storage environment, right? I can roll out 12 hosts with flash drives in it, right, and use those drives as storage for my virtual machines that are running on the host that might benefit an environment like a Horizon View environment. That's the VDI solution. Horizon View is a VDI solution, and VDI is the virtualized desktop infrastructure for VMware. So if I have my virtual machines on the hosts using compute resources, they can also store their files on the storage that's being spread out across the virtual SAN data store within that virtual SAN cluster. And because it's a cluster feature of vCenter server, you also get the benefit of HA and DRS within this single solution, if you will, the big cluster. And they've also introduced VMFS 6. I thought this would come out in vSphere 6, but apparently not. Came out in 6.5, so that's fine. Right? It supports up to, well, pardon me, it supports 512E drives and LUNs. All right? VMware made some changes into VMFS, and it's introducing VMFS 6 now. This version supports automatic unmap, which is pretty awesome. Which asynchronously tracks feed blocks and sends unmaps to storage in the background. So basically, you free up that storage automatically. Right? Also, you have this SE sparse. This will be the snapshot format supported on VMFS 6. Okay, so snapshotting is kind of taking a different turn now, but a more enhanced turn. Okay, it will not be supporting VMFS sparse snapshots, which is kind of like another way of doing snaps for virtual machines and products inside of VMFS. Okay. Let's see what else. So VMFS sparse snapshot format is not supported in VMFS 6, but it will continue to be supported in VMFS 5. So if you have a mixed environment with VMFS 5 and 6, and then you can use that. So 6 and 5, like I said, can coexist. There's no inline upgrade from 5 to 6, like there was from VMFS 3 to VMFS 5, right? But you can do data migrations, okay, using storage vMotion. Storage vMotion, you can migrate a virtual machine's files from one data store to another quite easily. All right, some management enhancements. Yeah. Okay, so some management enhancements. We have content library improvements, like I can pull ISO or mount an ISO directly from a content library. Enhanced DRS. So with this, we have more policies that we can create within DRS. They had your affinities, your anti-affinity policies within DRS. You have the virtual machine to host rules, and you even have virtual machine to virtual machine rules. They have HA improvements where you can do a orchestrated restart of virtual machines. So this allows admins to create dependency chains on VMs or VM groups, allowing for a restart order of these dependency chains. Like if you have a particular application that has several dependencies, you can have them restart in a particular order, which is great. Web client enhancements. You know, they've constantly enhanced the web client with the different past versions. Like 5.5 is the beginning of what we see now, but they've enhanced it in 6 and then now in 6.5 so that it's easier to use, it works faster. I don't know if you guys remember in 5.0 there was like this horrible little version that we don't even talk about anymore, and then 5.1 they had another version that was but nobody really liked it, and then 5.5 came out with the current look and feel that we have now for the web client, and it's improved tremendously in 6 and in 6.5 even more so. They've reorganized some tabs, changed some names, like there's no longer the Manage tab, but a Configure tab, right? And there's also not related objects, but there's, like if I looked at the data center object in my vCenter server's inventory, then I have VMs, I have hosts, and so on for those quote-unquote related objects. No longer have to deal with this client integration plugin, thankfully, right? That was kind of a pain in the neck because it didn't always work the way it should sometimes. And also, it stopped you from using certain features, like if I wanted to download a file from a data store, or if I wanted to import an OVF. I had to have this client integration plugin. So it's built into the client now. I mentioned there's also this HTML5 web client. This works along with the FlexNet web client. There's something called Proactive HA. Okay, Proactive HA is going to do a couple things for us. Let's see, we're having some notes on that. Yeah, so it leverages sensor data from server vendors to add an additional layer of availability for VMs by proactively leveraging DRS to vMotion virtual machines off of a degraded host prior to the host failing. So if you're monitoring the SIM data in the host and it detects some kind of an anomaly that's causing or could potentially cause this host to fail, then HA could fail over the virtual machine, right, without even the host failing yet. There's some upgrades, you can do some upgrades over IPv6 now, which is supported. I don't know a whole lot of people that are using IPv6 still yet, but I'm sure that that's coming out. Virtual Machine Console, right? They have the VMRC, or Virtual Machine Remote Console 9.0. It supports Linux as well as Windows and Mac OS. There's an auto-detect proxy settings, and the look and feel of the console has changed a bit. There's a network-aware DRS, which is pretty neat, so it can look at the load on the network and decide to migrate or not migrate the virtual machines. And some enhancements to Power CLI. Okay, in this release, Power CLI will be fully module-based, so no more snap-ins. Right now, Citrix, VMware, and large companies have snap-ins for Power CLI, and that allows us to run the commands against those different environments. But we don't have to worry about that anymore because it's all modular now. A couple of networking enhancements, like improved performance for our nested ESXi servers, like if you have a lab environment, improved manageability for infrastructure networks as well. So allowing a different gateway for different services like DRS, iSCSI, vMotion, and such. So that eliminates the need to add static routes to all your hosts, which is, could be a lot of work. It's cumbersome. Some enhancements to security, VMDK encryption. Let's look at a couple of those things real quick. Oops. So if I go to the web client and let's go to hosts and clusters real quick, and I select a virtual machine, and I go to edit settings. Under VM options, I have the ability to encrypt during vMotion, right? Required, opportunistic. Those are some of the details on that, and also here, real quick, disk. What am I looking at? Oh, sorry. Was that under advanced? There was, darn it. Missing where that was. Still getting used to it. You can encrypt your VMDK. Let's leave it at that. I forget exactly where it was. Secure boot of your host and the guest. That is under VM options. And then we got boot options. And, oh, I need to be on the host. My apologies. All right, where are you? Power management. So still getting used to this, a couple of these new features. I'll look for that in a minute if we have some time. Pardon me. And then we have our enhanced vCenter server events, encrypted vMotion. I showed you that real quick. And then there's also a new role called the No Cryptography Administrator. So not only can you create your own roles, but they're improving the different roles that we might have available to us. Here's that slide, the 6.0 and 6.5 comparison. And if we look down here real quick, we got physical CPUs per host has increased. Physical memory has not. VMs per host has not. Cluster size hasn't increased. We have proactive HA versus reactive. Integrated, vSphere integrated containers is something new. The different hardware versions up to 13. Management, you have the web client and the HTML client instead of the C#. vMotion, you can still migrate across vCenter servers, across vSwitches, and cross-cloud vMotion. Cross-cloud vMotion, pardon me. What else is exciting here? Virtual volumes 2.0, so they've improved virtual volumes. They get the virtual SAN 6.5. vCenter HA, vCenter server native backup, the vPostgres database. All right, we have 2,000 hosts and up to 25,000 virtual machines within that. So it's increased quite a bit from 6.0's features. Okay, and that is really what I got for the slide deck, Carl.
Good. Yes, thank you very much, Brian. We appreciated that. And well, it's just after 1, so I understand if some have to drop off. I do have one question. I'll forward to you, Brian, if there are any else. Now's the time to input that. One question that did come in, Brian, and Nizam was wondering how the backup appliance compares to Veeam's backup and replication. Okay,
so if you're talking about VDP, it's kind of now they have increased the capacity or capability of VDP. They actually took in 6.0. They integrated the advanced features that were kind of sold as a separate product. You could download the free VDP appliance, but get more capability if you paid for like the advanced. But that has been included in 6 and 6.5, I believe, as well. That is, I would say, not a replacement to an enterprise level backup solution. It's a way of backing up virtual machines for sure, and it's got quite a bit capability, but I wouldn't say that it's a replacement for a backup solution for your enterprise. That's always, you want, a completely integrated in the environment backup solution that might be backing up your database, backing up your storage system, all that good stuff. So as far as a comparison, Veeam is enterprise level, VDP is a solution that could help along with the enterprise level solution. It's almost like the replication. vSphere replication is a small component or a way of replicating virtual machines, but it doesn't have your recovery point objectives or your strength that SRM might or other replication products might.
Good. Well, thank you for that answer, Brian. I hope, Nazim, I hope that that answered that question sufficiently for you. So I don't see any more questions come in. And yep, Nazim, thanks you for that. That answered his question. That's excellent. Oh, one more came in, Edward. I'm currently on ESXi 5.5. And when vMotion happens to move VMS, there's a small blip. And he's wondering if this will be resolved in 6.5.
Well, when you say a blip, do you mean that you're looking at the console of the virtual machine, or you have a remote user that is in like an RDP session into the VM.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be more specific, Edward? 'Cause,
yeah, Edward, if you want
if,
to type in what your blip is.
Yeah. If you're looking at the console, then yeah, it's going to look like a blip. If you're in the virtual machine, like in a remote console RDP, then unless you have like a continuous ping going, you're probably not going to see anything. Theoretically, vMotion should not be interrupted or have any problem with any application, but I know in highly transactional applications, it might have some blips.
Yeah, good. Okay, hope that, yeah, so Edward, I hope that that answers your question there. If you want to just type in a thumbs up or if you need further detail. So I guess, well, that was excellent, Brian. I liked your example before that really this is just a base if you want to get into the stem of it. If you want to get deeper, well, we have a full 5 days of hands-on training on this that will help you out for that. Yeah, Edward just saying, in this example, we ran into an emergency situation with one of our hosts moving our file server. Several users have lost connectivity to some files or access to network resources. Is that maybe something you'd want to answer offline, Brian? Or
that's a hard one to answer because it's situational. And that might be a very large file server. I don't know all the particulars of your environment, like what is your backbone network that you're using for vMotion? What type of files are particularly being accessed? When you say several users lost connectivity to some of their files, are they copying, pasting at that point in time, or do they have the file open on their desktop? So it's kind of situational, but we could take it offline. I'd be happy to maybe go through it some more if you wanted to. It's up to you.
Good. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. I'll just, Edward, I'll forward you my email address there. I just put it in the chat box. And feel free to send me an email if you need more clarification on what Brian said, and we can continue the conversation that way. So that's excellent. We certainly do appreciate the questions, folks.
Yeah.
And Brian, thank you very much for your time, lending
my
your expertise to us. That's been a great time spent. So that ends today's session. Hopefully, we wish all of you a great rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you very soon on another upcoming webinar or one of our upcoming courses. Thank you, folks. Bye for now.